Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody. We live in a time where the gap between the richest and the rest of the society is widening alarmingly. In Austria, the top 1% own nearly half of the wealth here, while many struggle to make ends meet. Tonight, we will delve into the ethical and political implications of this inequality. We'll explore if our democratic systems can endure such disparities and what policies might restore the balance. Please join me in welcoming our guests tonight, Ingrid Robeyns and Marlene Engelhorn. As we tackle these issues together. Let me say a few words about our guests. Marlene Engelhorn is a prominent advocate for wealth redistribution and social justice. Born into a very wealthy Austrian family, she co-founded the initiative Tax Me Now, which calls for higher taxes on the wealthy. Marlene, your activism is driven by your belief in ethical responsibility and the need for systemic change to address economic inequality. Your personal commitment to donating all of your inheritance underscores your dedication to fostering a fair society. Welcome tonight.
Thank you.
Ingrid, you're our special guest tonight. You came by train from the Netherlands. You're a philosopher and social theorist specializing in ethics, social justice, and political theory. You're a professor at Utrecht University, and your research critically examines wealth inequality and its impact on democracy. Your recent book, it's here with me. You should check this out later on. You can buy it at the checkout over there. Your recent book delves into the ethical limits of wealth and advocates for, I would say, radical political changes to achieve a fairer wealth distribution. You're a vocal advocate for creating more equal structures through both your academic and your public discourse. I'm very happy that you came to Vienna. Welcome. Thank you. Ganz kurz zur organisatorischen Geschichte. Wir machen das Gespräch auf Englisch. Ich versuche so langsam wie möglich zu sprechen und auch so laut wie möglich. Ingrid spricht Deutsch, sagt aber, das Thema ist, na sagen wir mal so, Ökonomie ist so kompliziert, dass sie es lieber auf Englisch bespricht. Ihr könnt aber im Anschluss auch Fragen stellen, gerne auf Deutsch. Sie versteht eure Fragen sehr gut. Falls nicht, sagt sie, fragt sie einfach nach. Also das nur als Info für die Publikumsrunde. Okay, starten wir mit der Diskussion. I think most people in this room know the economist Thomas Piketty. He demonstrates with a ton of data that returns on capital, such as income from interest, stocks, or rents, historically exceed the overall real growth of the economy on average. So this means that those who can let their wealth work for them gain not only more, but also faster than everyone else. The inequality of the early 20th century is returning, is Piketty's analysis. Ingrid, in your book, you suggest that extreme wealth is often accumulated at the expense of the welfare of everybody else. Could you discuss the ethical implications of this wealth accumulation?
Yes. So, this is very loud. Yes? Okay. Oh.
It's only here very loud. Like over there, it's very, very not loud.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Why is it at the expense of everybody else? There are multiple answers to this question. One is that we see that a lot of big fortunes were actually made in ways where the process was tainted. I mean, so a good example is transatlantic slavery, where really the wealth of the so-called slave owners or holders, I mean, owner already says something about how the relationship was perceived, was basically led to all the fortunes of these families, and the people that were enslaved were never compensated. In fact, they often still had to work for many years in bad conditions after there was so-called liberation. And still today, there are people, families in the US, in the UK, in the Netherlands, even the royal family in the Netherlands finally decided they will have an investigation in it, that have family fortunes that are tainted in that way. So that's already an obvious case. But this is an obvious case where I assume we all agree this shouldn't happen. But What I try to explain in this chapter that is about tainted money is that there's actually many shades of this kind of taintedness, all the way up to the distinction between tax avoidance and tax evasion. And what you often find in public debates, and especially with politicians, is that they say, yeah, but tax evasion is wrong because you basically do something illegal, but tax avoidance is fine because you stay within the law. But what they do not say is that this line between tax avoidance and tax evasion has shifted over time because of the lobbying of the richest people. So that means that we now have a lot of tax money no longer that we used to have in the past because the richest, say the 1%, has lobbied. So this is another example. Now let me make the kind of abstract point, which is we can't talk about these things in a kind of piecemeal way. We have to look at the economy as a system where we all collaborate and cooperate, and hence questions about distribution and who contributes what and who gets what are unavoidable with any economic question. And that is just what happened over the last, since the end of the 70s, that we restructured the economy in such a way that those who already had a lot got even more. And we could also have used that money, for example, to just lift more people out of poverty. But we chose something else. We is, of course, the mysterious collective, we, the people that were in power, not necessarily all of us here.
Okay, Ingrid, thank you very much. Marlene, you decided a couple of years ago you're going to redistribute all of your inheritance back. You absolutely say, I give it back. So the Citizen Council, you founded, I think half a year ago, will present its results on Tuesday. Everybody is super excited about that. And it's aptly named Guter Rat für Rückverteilung. I don't think that's like a coincidence. So are you simply giving back what others before you took from society, from like us?
Yes. I can only agree with what has just been told to us by Ingrid Robeyns, because all accumulated wealth has to come from somewhere. It doesn't pop up out of thin air. And if it comes from somewhere, when you look at the masses of it, billions of it, trillions of it, where do you find just one source of it? You don't. And then what you do have, you have several sources, and a lot of them sit here right now. You're all sources of wealth of me. So if I, just structurally, let's pretend I am the richest percent, and you, I include the podium, are the other 99%. So what happens, I have, let's say, 100 million, and I put them into assets, which means I buy houses, I buy shares of companies, I buy gold, I buy energy sources like petrol, or maybe, I don't know, it can also be green energy. I heard that this is in vogue now. So I buy all of that. And then every time that you need access to housing because you can't not live somewhere, or you want to work someplace, or you want to heat your home or feed your family because you have to buy groceries, you pay me money to get resources that you need. So constantly, because I own all of this, you pay me your income, and your profit out of your work also goes into my pocket, which means I suck wealth out of your pockets to put into mine. And I don't do, like, now I'm Marlene again, I don't do this on purpose. I was born into this. And this is why distribution is so important, because on the larger scale, how wealth flows back and forth, or only one direction, makes a huge difference for the state of how we all live in, which is why it's so important that if you acknowledge, okay, this just, I didn't inherit it because it's just there, and my family happens to be so much better than everybody else, and that's why they're so rich. No, it came from somewhere. A lot of the sources I don't even know, but it also means that it has to go somewhere. And I can't consume all of these. I mean, I guess I could, but I mean, it would be an effort, and that's work, and you know, that's for the others. So, sorry for the bad jokes, it's the only way I can deal with this shit. And so that's why I want to give it back, to acknowledge that in my position and don't be like, I donated as if I was the source of it, but to see you are the source of it, which is why it needs to go back to you, and it has to go back through you, and that's why a civic assembly of 50 people who are much more representative of you than they are of me, but also of me, because representation includes the top 1%. So yeah, this is really not by accident. I try to be clear in my political understanding of how things work. I'm so nervous.
Please don't be, you're the only fluent person in English on this podium. So, 8 out of 10 people here in Austria, whether rich or poor, believe that politics must close the gap between the rich and the poor. And among respondents who say wealth is unfairly distributed, 80% also say our political system doesn't work. So this is a very high percentage. 5 years ago, only 33% believed that. So I do think trust is a very important currency of our democratic system, and I don't think there is an exact percentage where you can say, okay, this is how much distrust and how much hopelessness a democracy can sustain. But still, despite all of these facts, the issue of wealth concentration is barely ever really discussed as a democratical political question. It's always just an economic question, if even so. So, Ingrid, why do you think that is?
So I can only give you an informed guess. I didn't study this. I also don't know whether anybody really knows for sure, but I'll tell you what I believe to be the case. So it's of course in the interest of the richest that we do not discuss this. And the richest control politics to a much, much larger degree than anybody else. I mean, this is actually a fact. This is based on studies. So that means that they try to take it off the agenda. And there's plenty of examples that, I mean, I have a whole chapter in the book that gives examples of this. And there is, so we have had this, the increase in wealth, but at the same time we've had an increase in precariousness of the middle classes. For example, people are less sure about their pensions. Housing has become, in many parts in Europe, I'm not sure about Austria, but has become extremely expensive. People are all indebted to pay for their housing, which is just a basic need. They are no longer sure that their kids, that the social mobility that previous generations had, that is still possible. So there's a general sense of more insecurity, higher level of insecurity. And what we've seen is that you would actually hope that this translates into support for political movements and political parties and politicians that really want to solve this issue. But what we've seen is, and this is unfortunate because it's a kind of a repeat of what happened in the last century, is that there are political opportunists who actually say they are there for the ordinary people, and that at the same time they scapegoat vulnerable people, mainly migrants, refugees, but also, I mean, which for me is really mind-blowing because I think it makes no logical sense at all. Gays, lesbians, trans people, and feminists, of course, they're all sources of the problems. And in that way, they try to distract the attention from the fact that it should be about the economy. They also say that they will do stuff for the ordinary people, like, say, for example, care for, say, healthcare or elderly care when they're in power. But if you look at their track record, what they do is they protect the interests of the richest. I mean, the clearest example on which we have empirical evidence is Donald Trump. Donald Trump all the time presented himself as being there for the ordinary persons, but then what he really did was he protected big capital. And I'm very sad to say that this week In the country in which I live, in the Netherlands, we will have for the first time since the Second World War a government in which an extreme right-wing party will be the leading party. And what my colleagues who are political scientists also say, who look at really at the voting behaviors, say, yeah, they say they're there for ordinary people, but if you look at their voting behavior, they are not. And that is, I think, the tragedy, and at the same time shows that we cannot solve this issue of wealth inequality without strengthening democracy.
We discussed that later on. You have a very interesting part in your book where you discuss how the wealth concentration even is bad for the super rich. I love that part. So you said the ceaseless pursuit of accumulation where nothing ever is enough, like you need more, more, more all the time, all your life, harms the super rich themselves. So you studied that, you cite a book also in your book, being a child with extreme wealth has damaging effects.
Yes.
Yes.
So I should say, I think from all the chapters in the book, I think this is the one that is weakest based on empirical research, and the reason is that the richest people in societies try not to be studied. They try to, I mean, this is also in the, I read on the way here from Utrecht to here, I read the book Überreichtum from Martin Schurz, and he says that one of the problems is that the data are missing. And I think that this is really important. So what I could find was that the children from the richest actually are often they have more anxieties. They're deprived of attention of their parents. There's all sorts of issues. So it's actually we always care about the children of the poor, but actually paradoxically we should also care about the children of the super rich. But also, and that I think is the more important thing, that this accumulation of money just becomes an addiction. And that is even people who stepped out of this described. And since I published my book, there is a Dutch psychologist who has written a book in Dutch about these addictive effects. And he cites some solid psychological and brain studies that actually show that it is true that just wanting to always accumulate more money works as an addiction. So yeah, you would think it would be better for everybody. I also think it would be better for them because of the possible danger that we will, if this goes on like this, we will have a revolution. We might have a revolution. I don't know. It's a possibility. The pitchforks may rise, which is not in their interest either.
Social unrest could be a problem, but let's do a study together, because we have a super rich kid right over here. So let's talk about the damaging effects on grow up very rich. How was it, Marlene?
This is particularly funny because prior to this evening, I had a research talk with the University of Göttingen on how is it to grow up super rich. Because I'm the one who I do this regularly, because every time they look for people for their studies, I'm like happily gonna give you answers, but I'm gonna pull your data one way. So the thing is, when people like me grow up super rich, they don't know. It's like the fish in the water. It's the most normal thing to be super rich, because you don't know any other life. This is what you experience every day, so it's normal. And everything that is not super richness is not normal, and only over the course of a lot of interaction with other people, if you realize I am the odd one out, they are the normal ones. Wait, what? So already the exclusivity of growing up super rich, or too rich, or uber rich, I don't even know, in German I would say überreich, but I don't really know how to translate this properly, so no.
Extreme rich?
Extreme rich?
You don't like super, you can say extreme.
Yes, the extreme rich. No, it is a form of extremism, just blatantly, right? So you are in this exclusive circle, but you can't help but meet people who are not rich all the time. Because when you're 1% out of 100 and you walk around in the city, you go and have coffee, your waiter, waitress probably is not going to be extremely rich. So this interaction is choreographed. You order your coffee, they bring it, you tip more or less well. Like you pay, obviously, but also you tip and more or less well. So you don't have interaction, really. You just bump into each other. And then the few spaces that are left for you to actually interact would be school, but then you go to private school, like me. Or university, but you go to private elite universities, where people say, only the cleverest people study there. And I'm like, no. You have to be able to afford this, so only the richest people study there. This is the correct way of putting this. And what remains of social spaces that are not already curated through entry price and also through culture to mix? Because a lot of spaces are designed so that a lot of people really feel, I'm not welcome here, I'm not supposed to be here. But people like me in these spaces go like, I own this place. And that's how you get brought up in being super rich. You literally feel like you own the world. Obviously, not everybody feels the same way, and it can show differently. Some people are more passive in this, and some people are more active in this. But at the end of the day, what happens, and you wrote about this, so I'm segueing to you with this, is you desolidarize, which is just a wonky way of saying the solidarity between you and the rest of society crumbles and breaks away, and you lose empathy for what's not your own reality, which is so rare and so extreme that it doesn't match society, which also means that you constantly are at war with society in order to reinforce that what you experience is okay. And since you're in power, you make everybody cater to your needs. So I think it albeit very comfortable, you can pay for everything. There's no question, do you need money because you have it? This question does not exist, do I have enough money? It doesn't exist in a rich world. Only, do you want something? And are you willing to pay for it? This is a completely different set. So it's very comfortable, but it kills your political activity unless it is to reinforce that you are righteous in your position. That is reinforced, and it kills your empathy, and it breaks ties to actual social connections and interactions.
Okay, Marlene, so what do you think? Are the super rich even part of the democratic system here, or are they totally checked out? Because they don't need it.
I think structurally they're totally checked out. Like, you could say, well, they also go voting, so they're part of democracy. I'm like, and not really. They're actually part of a feudal system that is in competition with democracy. Because you have dynasties, wealth is passed down generation to generation to generation. This is how aristocracy used to be. This is feudal. This is not democratic. Nobody chooses in equal ways how things run. And this logic of being ruled through bloodlines is in stark contrast to democracy, where you go, it doesn't matter where you were born, who you are part of this system and you should be able to vote. Like, ideally, obviously, democracy is more complex than that, and it doesn't really work like this. But fundamentally, it's opposed, and the richest percent, being part of these feudal structures, structurally has checked out of democracy, and the richest percent of the richest percent actively fights democracy, because democracy threatens capitalism.
Let's talk about this a little bit later. There's one very common assumption in economics. It says that increasing wealth and assets of the richest will eventually benefit everyone else. Austrian people know this as, geht's der Wirtschaft gut, geht's uns allen gut. This is an actual campaign. Okay, this assumption is known as the trickle-down theory, of course. So the theory is like it trickles down slowly, even to the bottom over time if you are patient. Therefore, the conclusion is that we wouldn't need to tax the rich because over time we benefit anyway, so it's fine. And there's this very well-known economist, Joseph Stiglitz, and he argues that this assumption is based on a fallacy, if you want to. The rich do not use the additional wealth from tax cuts to, I don't know, create more jobs or something good for society. No, they take this money to defend their privileges, like more economic inequality. So this leads to even more like divide between the rich and the poor. So my question is, with this analysis in mind, can we still address wealth concentration democratically?
That's a very good question. So I'm of the opinion that giving up is not an option. So that means we have to organize ourselves, because we do in the end still all have a vote. We do have still formal democracy, but what I said in the earlier question you said to me is that many people fall for the lure of populist politicians who actually should explain to us why we're in this position, but rather scapegoat those who are other. But it is, I think it's actually, what is worrying is that this, you could actually call it a vicious circle, whereby we cut down the taxes on the richest, we weakened the provisions, the social state for everybody else, and the richest then started to more and more influence politics. This has been a vicious circle that's been going on for, since the 80s. So that's like 45 years. And I mean, there has been, of course, talk about this earlier with but for example, take the Panama Papers. This was a huge scandal. And what happened? Yeah. So I think that is the problem. So it does mean that that to me was surprising when I wrote this book, that when at the end I come to, okay, what now should we do? I think we should all embrace our role as a citizen. We should basically become political. And that is, to some people who read this book, they say, you're talking about a division of money, and then you start to talk about politics, but it is because it's the only way to address these structural issues is, well, to have evenings like tonight, but then also to educate ourselves and talk to other people, and that's really the work that organizers do.
Let's stress this point a little bit. So here in Austria, also like globally, we see wealth inequality is rising over decades by now. So let's talk about what is here at stake. What are the potential long-term impacts on democracy if these trends continue unchecked?
I always answer this question that I have no ball in which I can look into the future. I don't think we know. But I do think we've seen, if you look at the electoral outcomes of the last, say, 5 years in both Europe and the US, I do think we should really be worried for a return to what we had in the 1930s. I really think this is no longer like a worry of people who are too worried. I really think this is a very serious worry. And then, of course, that would be a very bad situation. And that is really what I do find hard to understand about the parties that are nominally still defending the rule of law and nominally still saying, okay, we want to protect democracy, etc., but we are, so the neoliberal parties, that they do not understand that the relationship between their economic policies and the decline of the welfare state, and also what neoliberalism has done is not just all these changes in the fiscal rules, but it had also changed whatever word you want to use, the culture or the dominant ideology. And one of those aspects is that people increasingly see themselves in economic roles and no longer as citizens. And that whole analysis, they just don't want to go there. So if I should actually confess that before writing this book, I was deliberately staying away from the word neoliberal. And the reason is, if you use that word, you're immediately branded as somebody who is using swear words and have sweeping analysis. But I really think there is no way to make the analysis as it should be without, I mean, I sometimes say to journalists or to people, you don't have to use the word neoliberal. You can just say the dominant economic ideology from the end of the 20th and the beginning of the 21st century. It's the same thing, but it's just a long sentence to say the same thing. But if we don't understand that, we can't solve this problem. It's interesting, Marlene, what you said about the fish in the water, it's the same. So if we've had this for 45 years, it means that everybody in this room who's 50 or younger has never known anything else.
I think Milanovic said once, ideology is like the air that we breathe. It's like we don't recognize it even as an ideology. Yeah? And I think neoliberalism is just that. Okay. You said a very important word, citizen and citizenship, I think, Ingrid. Marlene, looking at the Austrian situation, we see that aggravating the situation is the fact that those who experience inequality, like for the most, are significantly less likely to vote. Like we see nearly 9 out of 10 people at the top vote, so like almost everybody, the rich 1%, the top 10%, all of them are going to vote. But soon every second person at the bottom stays at home. And even worse, when we look at like my home district, the 15th district of Vienna, that shows that the bottom are not even allowed to vote anymore. I picked out the numbers. The resident population in the 15th district has remained fairly constant over the last 50 years. It's just under 80,000 inhabitants. But on the other side, the number of voters has decreased from 68,000 to only 36,000. Because people are living here and working here, but they are not allowed to vote because they don't have the Austrian citizenship. So if you put it out, on the map, like whole of Vienna, 60% of all the workers are not allowed to vote here in this city. Through the backdoor of the strictest citizenship laws in the world, we invented a census voting right, if you want. So would you still consider this a functional democracy?
No. But I make the difference between the formal democracy, like the fact that everybody who has the Austrian citizenship at least gets to vote in Austria when they're 16 years of age or older. Fair enough, we have that. We still do have that. It's not completely gone yet. That's a formal way of looking at things, and then also looking at, we don't actually vote our government, we vote our parliament, which is not the same. And then who gets to form government and how these rules work. So these rules are applied, they're there, but they're very, very weak when they are not upheld by democracy as a praxis, I would say. Something that has to go beyond the purely electoral, political part of society. I truly believe that when you put democracy into action, that means you democratize schools. You democratize the working places. They're usually structured in a very hierarchical manner. We don't experience democracy in our everyday lives. I do a lot because I am in associations that are ruled in a democratic way, but that's because we all, especially at Taxmi now, we're wealthy people, we can literally afford to set it up this way, to take our time to organize ourselves this way. But usually it's not the case. When you go to school, people tell you what to do and you have to comply, period. Families usually also run that way. You have different variations to it, but it's not necessarily a place where you have this sense of equality, of democratic equality. And the working place of all places, it's usually super hierarchical. So we are very used to this feudal, again, this feudal structuring of power. As soon as people gather, power exists. I'm so in love with the thinking of Hannah Arendt that I'm not critical of her. I just repeat her a lot. I just need you to know that, where this is coming from, and it's a very biased brain of mine. And she just says, when people gather, you have power, and then it's how you channel it. And you can channel it very formally, which we did, and we do have elections, they come up, please, all of you go vote, please, please, all of you go vote, and tell everybody you know to please go vote. But you also have a society that is structured feudally, where you have the owners who own companies, who don't even do the work of managing necessarily. Sometimes they do, but not necessarily. Usually, at a certain level, you employ people to do the management, and they will tell others what to do, who tell others what to do, who tell others what to do, and this is how this gets down. Nothing is democratic there. And I think unless we work on the very basis levels of everyday lives and democratize everyday life, if we can't do that, then the formal structures of democracy are just going to be a reflection of how alive democracy is in society in general. And if we get it alive in society, then formal politics will have to follow. They will not be able to ignore that unless they use violence, which is what happens in authoritarian regimes, or you can sometimes call them illiberal democracies, which I find is such a weird phrasing that I don't see how democracy fits into this description. Like Viktor Orban, basically, this is a dictatorship, what's happening there, right? And then they use violence. So I truly believe that, and I've learned this from a very brilliant person who had an excellent speech at Republika 24 that I recommend, who said voting doesn't change things because it comes at the end of political process. So it also comes at the end of democratic processes. If we don't bring it to life in our everyday lives, and this is a huge amount of work, I don't want to say that this is easy, by no means easy. It's even tricky for rich people like me, who not only were not brought up democratically, although I did because my family is a bit weird like that, but have the means to actually pay for democratic organization. Even then it's tricky. It's always super hard work. But it's this effort, it's just so worth it that when we get to do this properly and as a society in this super diversity mix that we are, because we're so freaking different, all of us, then this will translate into formal politics. So I have a lot of hope, and I see the action fields not with voting, which is good that we still have that, but much prior. And I know you agree.
I do. Ingrid, let's explore another argument I hear a lot whenever I talk about wealth concentration. It's often argued that very wealthy people are also very charitable, like they are contributing to the common good. Oh my God, you hear this also a lot, I can see. Maybe less through taxes, but through high donations. However, having a lot does not automatically mean they give a lot, as we know through a lot of studies. The data says poor households are relatively more generous than the richest one, but still, it's an argument often made. You gave a talk recently, and you said the ethical responsibility of the wealthy goes beyond donation. It's about changing structures.
Yes, so you're asking two things. You're asking what do I think about philanthropy, and you're asking what should the richest do, right? So philanthropy is really, so I think it's the title of the chapter in my book on philanthropy is not the solution. So that basically summarizes what I think. That doesn't mean I'm against all forms of philanthropy. I actually think if ordinary people are generous, I think it's a good thing. Why? Because it doesn't come with power. So then you just share what you have with those who have less. The problem with philanthropy is that it's undemocratic. So people who have money that often they should not have had in the first place decide what to do with it. It is supported by tax deductions, which I think we should abolish. Because why should we support people to be able to donate their money, which means that there's less money that goes to the government that all the voters can decide how to use? It's also often used as a way to channel money to others, like you hire your own children. That's actually only in countries where you do still have inheritance taxation. We do need to talk about inheritance taxation. Here in Austria, I gave 3 interviews to media today, and I mentioned the issue of inheritance taxation to all 3 of them, and all 3 of them ignored it. So that's why I'm just now saying we need to talk about it. But that is in countries where you do have inheritance taxation. They set up a foundation and they officially hire their own children, pay them high wages. So it's basically also a route for tax avoidance. So these are all reasons, but I think the fact that it's undemocratic and that it's a source of power is the most fundamental one. And then sometimes the effects of inheritance of philanthropy are also problematic. So the people who've studied what Bill Gates, who's seen often as a hero when it comes to philanthropy, has done he did some work with the educational system in the US, it's generally seen as a failure. But he could just do it because he's so rich and therefore he's so powerful, and he gives donations to all important players and institutions and universities, and everybody knows they should not criticize him or they will no longer get any money. That's power. So that is a problem. So then this brings me to the second question: what should the super rich then do? Well, as you said, I think we need to change the system. So we need to change the structures. So I think either they do something that changes the structures. So what I found interesting is that if you look at the history of how we got to the current neoliberal situation, is that there were all sorts of think tanks and people with big money that supported the spread of ideas. So for example, when the owner of Reader Digest in the US, who was a libertarian, he published a shorter version of Hayek's first book and distributed to 1 million households. So where is the philanthropist who wants to distribute 1 million copies of my book? That's not going to happen, right? So that is the problem. They buy influence. Murdoch is very clear. Murdoch just bought media, first in Australia, then in the UK, and then in the US. So I do think that that giving money that either disrupts this ideology is good, giving money or using the money that strengthens democracy is good, and I see your decision in that second line. And the third one is actually your combination in my head between the second and the third. And the third one is giving money where it may do good, but you yield the power. You don't decide, and that's also you didn't decide. So that's what I found interesting is that the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, Mackenzie Scott, who has I don't exactly know, but something like 200 billion. So that is 200 billion. Just write down all the zeros. That is a hell of a lot of money. She has set up a foundation. It's called the Yield Foundation. So what I think is interesting is yield means two things. It means letting things grow. So what she does is she gives it to grassroots organizations. I think it's weaker democratically because from what I understand, she still decides. And she may have advisors, but she also says, I yield power. I do not. She basically spreads the money among organizations where she and her advisor think they're in the front line of receiving social injustices. So those that are really trying to improve the world, making it more just. So she yields power. She doesn't decide what they have to do. In the early stages, she just gave the money and then asked them for 2 pages after 3 years where they just said what they did. Whereas most of the time, of course, with the big foundations, you have to write grant applications. Writing a grant application, if you don't know how you have to do that, how can you do this? So that is what I think are the structural changes. Changing the ideologies. I should actually add so I think that I now have 4. I'm making this up here on the spot if you don't see this. But I still think what I say is true. Or what I should say, it's what I believe. So it's changing the ideology and the culture. The second is there's theories of how you change society. And these theories, they use this model called an X. There's the dominant ideology and system that should go down. And then there's the one that is actually brewing and that should go up, that should become dominant. And I asked scholars who work on this, like, how then does that thing become dominant? And they say it's because the other one goes down because it's critiqued, and it's because the new ones come up because they are put in the spotlights, and via examples, it's shown that they're much better. And so I think that is another possibility, that if you have lots of money, you invest it in, say, a cooperative or something that will bring this alternative up. So those are, I think, 4 ways to do it.
Thank you, Ingrid. So Marlene, Ingrid is like, she likes what you're doing. She thinks you're doing great. That's good. That's good.
She knew that.
I know. So let's talk about your personal role, considering your own background and your decision to give back all of your inheritance. How do you see the role of the extreme rich? What is their role in the political process when we considering their wealth is threatening democracy?
If you take democracy seriously, as a rich person, you should accept that your voice is just one of many voices, but hardly any rich person does that. And I think there is something that lies behind this that is very normal to think that you understood how things should run and that you kind of know better than everybody else. And whoever here believes that they never think that they know something better, please raise your hand, because I would like to know how you do that. I frequently think, I figured this out. And then I talk to people about it and I realize I haven't even thought of half of what could have been thought about, which is why talking is so important to other people. Yeah, I think the role of people like me should be one that upholds, through setting the examples that we structurally can set, the values that democracy also has in itself. So to me personally, this translates very concretely into being transparent. So I want to be transparent about what I do and offer a public discourse on all of my actions. Every time I redistribute, I am transparent about this. I leave it to the organization to choose how to be transparent about it. But all of the organizations I've ever redistributed to can publish this however they want to publish it, unless it's mean, which it never is, but that's just basic decency. But other than that, transparency. So, and also inviting in the critique of the public eyes and ears and be like, so this is what I'm doing, and I'm doing this because I believe in something, but I do this also because I can. What do you actually think of this? And to invite this discourse to consider that maybe we should all go to the place where we say, just because you can do it, doesn't mean you should. And the phrase that I like is, just because you're in power, it doesn't mean you should be in charge. And I'm in power, so making it transparent and then bringing so many people, as you said, with the grassroots and the frontline workers, people who understand the politicality of their work and who are embedded in an ecosystem that is trying to go deep into society to change the quote-unquote normality in terms of asking, is it normal that we have inequality this high? Or has it changed to become this incredibly extreme? Is it normal that you're in no power in your everyday life, but you get to vote every couple of years? Is this normal or is it not normal? And if it's not normal, what can you do and how can you be part of it? And how can this group be a group where you maybe become politically active? And to share this power, to make it transparent and to be open about the fact that I'm, like in my case, that I'm just everywhere. I get to speak everywhere because I'm rich. So I decided, one of the reasons I have no degree is because I started studying, I never ended it, so that the media could never put a title to my name and pretend that they invite me because I am a studied person, an intellectual.
Das ist die lustigste Ausrede für einen Studienabbruch, die ich je gehört habe.
I have not... it's kein Abbruch. It's kein, I am paying my fair share so that I can remain inscribed, right? So this is a door that I keep open.
Like Sebastian Kurz.
But wow, it breaks my heart. No, but the thing is, what I wanted to I'm so going to use this the next time I'm on the media. I'm just like Sebastian Kurz. How is that for your favorite rich person? So, no, but I wanted them to put millionaire everywhere when they interview me, like on TV, and they put the name Marlene Engelhorn, and then they put something. Like with you, it's the founder of Momentum Institute. But with me, what would they do? And they always ask me, what should we do? What should we put there? And they want to be respectful. I'm like, put millionaire heiress. And they're like, we didn't want to do this. It sounds so mean. I'm like, but it's true. Like, you talk to me because I'm rich, right? And to make these things transparent, to make these things topics of the conversation, I guess. And, very importantly, be open to be royally joked about, like right now.
There are not very many extreme rich people like you are, so I think we shouldn't rely on the good rich doing the right thing. And Ingrid, you wrote a whole book on this topic, and you have even brought up some ideas how we could change the wealth distribution situation. You state in your book that there's an ethical limit to wealth, and we as a society should establish this limit together. Could you elaborate on this limit, and how could it be defined, and what criteria should be considered here?
Yes, so the book basically gives reasons why wealth concentration is a problem. Every chapter a reason. Just to summarize, it's a problem because often the money is tainted. People shouldn't have had it in the first place. It's a problem because of the two ways in which it harms society. The first is it undermines the principle of political equality. The second is it is not compatible with the principles of ecological sustainability. It's also a problem because high wealth concentration can actually never be morally deserved. That is quite a philosophical argument. It has to do with when can you say that you really deserve something. I think the case of inheritance is very clear. You didn't do anything to be born out of a certain womb, so you can never say, I deserve that inheritance. In the case of the so-called self-made millionaires, it's a different story, but still, I think you can say that you can deserve sometimes more than somebody else, but you can never deserve to be a deca-millionaire. And then there is also the arguments that you already mentioned that it's actually also not good for the super rich themselves. So these are all reasons. Now, then I argue for this view, limitarianism, which says it would be better if we were to live in a world without people being super rich. It's a dot on the horizon. It is what we philosophers call a regulative ideal. I'm sorry to say, it's not going to happen tomorrow. So, but then the question is, what does this mean? Does it mean that we should tax them completely? Well, actually, I think we should change the socioeconomic system so that we move into that direction. We should also change the way we produce, the way we organize workplaces, all these things, so that, and then of course taxation comes in too, so that we will get there. And then the big question is, where is that limit? Well, it is, so desert basically would mean the limit would be low. Harm to democracy also means the limit would be low. Harm to ecology actually would, at present state of technology, would make the limit very low. And the big question is, how much do you want to give room for the fact that a part of the population is mainly, or to a significant extent, motivated by material gain in order to work and to innovate and to take risks? Incentives. So incentives will push the limits up, and the other things will push it down. And then it is really, in the end, a weighing between these different effects, and also a democratic decision where you want to have that limit. I say in the book 10 million. The reason I say 10 million, I really don't know. I don't know. First of all, it's democratically decided. Secondly, we do not know at what level people would stop innovating and so forth. We just have no evidence on that. The reason I say 10 million is that because if I had not given a number people who said, yeah, I agree with you. You cannot have more than 10 billion, but below it's fine. So the limit they would put would be too high. Especially in the US, there's an increasing number of people who say, yeah, there's a problem with billionaires. But I think, no, the problem is not with billionaires. The problem is with decamillionaires, people who have multiple millions. So that's the first threshold, the political. But in addition, so that would somebody like me get off the hook, because I don't have by far no 10 million. Actually, I'm just an ordinary person. But still, I could give gifts. Because it's easy for people like me to say, yeah, but those up there, actually not just for people like me, I think for many people here in the room, it's easy to say, oh, but they up there, they should give, but I should not give. So there is a second layer of analysis, which is really about encouraging sharing more widely among everybody. And that's where the second limit comes in, which is a moral voluntaristic limit, which is basically the answer to the question, how much do I need? And that question is so alien to neoliberalism, because neoliberalism really builds in us this idea, the sky is the limit. The sky is not the limit. Nobody needs an endless amount of money. So we should ask this question, how much do we need? And then I think many people actually could share more. But it is really a very different kind of logic. The first one is deeply political. It's about the economic system. The second one is really about asking, how much do I need?
I think this is a very interesting question. How much do I need, for everybody in this room? But there's one person who already answered the question, how much do I need? Marlene, you decided I don't need anything. I can give everything away. How did you come to this solution or resolution for yourself?
I do need a few things. Very much. But I also believe in the give and take. And I got the money that I have through the inheritance, through birth, and I perfectly agree. Although I don't believe in the notion that anybody needs to be able to earn to live in dignity. I think life in dignity excludes the notion of having to be earned. Otherwise, it's not dignity. So life in dignity should not be earned. So I don't disagree with meritocracy and blah, blah, blah. And this word of deserving, just, I don't really like it, but I understand how it's used. So I didn't deserve the money that I inherited. So that I wanted to redistribute as fully as possible. I can never reach the 100% because I used some of it to sustain myself for the last 3 years to just do what I do. I didn't go to work for a wage. So there's that. And this is the goal for me, to be working for a wage, to be one of many people who contributes to society, pays taxes, and has to interact on a level where my financial status doesn't outstage someone else so vastly that if I don't like whatever I'm hearing, I can just literally buy myself out of it. And so I was like, not only do I get this money because I was born, which I principally think is wrong because it's feudalism and not democracy, so I want to give it back, but also because then I will be presented with the issue of I got to do something to get what I need. I want to enter this back and forth that by no means is perfect. There is so much to do. It's not my discourse, so I never touch on it, but there's so much work still to do to make this a society where the back and forth, the give and take of working and wages and taxes, to make this more equal. Obviously, there's, yes, but I want to be part of that. And you also remind me of this every once in a while when I forget it, to mention it, quote unquote, transparency issue. I'm part of a super, super, super rich family. It doesn't matter how hard I fail, because I just have to call mom. And who else has this kind of safety net to know that one phone call solves all of your issues? So I can go and try to become as close as possible to be one of many, but structurally, I will always remain a little on the outside or with one foot over the line. And so at the end of the day, I believe in sharing the example and finding as many people as possible to do this together, and then there will be a we, and it will be a collective of people who think sharing is caring, and they will just topple the normality of this sky limitless greed and establish a system where I don't have to call my mom because it's just different, and I want to live to see it, so you got to help me do it.
Okay, people, now it's your turn. We have a microphone for you as well. There is one colleague with a microphone. Who has a question? Let's be very, very polite and keep the question short so everybody can have their say. Raise your hand. Ah, perfect. Here in the second row. Geht auf Deutsch, ich sag's nur. Huh?
I guess it's okay in English as well. Thank you very much for all of your sayings and what you said, and also what you do. Question on Marlene. How are you perceived in your super, super, super rich bubble?
Thank you. Marlene, let's
Do you want to collect
gather
question?
three questions and then go back. Is there another question? Yeah, okay, here. Let's do the first row, and then I see in the last row another woman.
Ich höre in politischen Diskussionen immer, wenn wir die Reichen jetzt besteuern, dann fliehen sie aus dem Land. Glauben Sie das auch? Ich glaube es nicht.
You understood? Thank you. Can you, gibst du das Mikro wieder dem Kollegen, der herumrennt? Na, warte, da ist es schon, schau, es kommt dir entgegen. Ganz hinten war noch eine Dame, die sich gemeldet hat. Genau, super, die Frage nehmen wir auch noch mit.
I also have a question for Marlene. When was the point when you realized that you were not a fish in the sea, but, I don't know, a shark?
So this is something I learned a few years ago. Whenever you are with Marlene, nobody is interested in you. I'm very sorry, Ingrid. I mean, you wrote a whole book, but who cares? Marlene, how is it? No, I'm just joking. Marlene, so that's a bunch of questions for you. Please answer.
Okay, now if I forget the question, I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at this. So, I'm very lucky because I grew up in a family that actually, like the close family, I don't know everybody in the family, it's a larger one. They're actually democratic. So they actually believe that, yeah, if you have to pay tax, you pay tax, period. So I'm lucky. And then I found only the rich people who also believe in democracy and taxes to be friends with me. And we created Tax Me Now. And we agree on the fact that there needs to be that. So my bubble is super tiny and super biased. I hardly ever go into the bad rich bubble, which is only bad because they don't like me there. Which is okay because I also don't like being there. And it's a conflict thing. I try to enter it. I try to be open for conversation because every once in a while you find the odd other rich kid who only knows this bubble and doesn't know the democratic rich bubble and needs connection. And when you find them, 1 out of 100 times, it's always been worth it to be on a podium where people literally yell at you just for being there. And then there's a person approaches you and goes, you know what, I'm only here for you. Can we please talk because I'm in a similar situation. I need someone to talk. So that's that. Then I will actually leave the capital flees the country question to you because I think you know it, and that way you can also and the shark thing. So I don't know if I understood it properly, but you said that I realized there was a shark, which means that I'm eating rich fish. Like, I don't eat fish, so no. I don't know, I think there is not one moment where I realized it. I'm just lucky as fuck. Because I'm surrounded by people who believe in democracy, who believe in sharing, and a lot of friends who told me to my face when I said something stupid, this is stupid. Think about this again. How dare you? This is rubbish, blah, blah, blah. Nobody crawled up my ass. They didn't want that. They wanted actual friendship, which meant that they were not impressed by my blah, blah, blah. But on the contrary, and even now, when I lose grip in some way, they get me back down to earth where I belong, and I'm just really lucky that these relationships have formed me into who I am, and that I remain curious. So yeah, I'm lucky, I guess that's it. And relationships outside of your own bubble that might start wonkily and weird, and you don't really know how to do it and how to navigate cross-class relationship. How can I say this? I'm going to say it wrong. Say it anyway. Just please try. Any kind of weird bubble-piercing relationship starts on the weirdest foot. It's never going to be smooth. But when you establish this relationship, it's always worth it.
You're welcome, Marlene. Okay, there's this
Ingrid, no, the Ingrid.
The other question, yeah, I would.
Yeah, so there will be some effect, but I think we should really see this mainly as a threat. So the super rich will say, yeah, but you know, if you tax us, we will go. And it is true that some super rich do go. I mean, we have in the Netherlands, we have a motor rider, Max van der Stappen, who earns millions. He lives in Monaco. I mean, and some journalists dare to say, well, you know, he got all his free education, free healthcare in this country, and the moment he starts to earn, he goes to Monaco. People were furious. How dare we criticize a successful Dutch person? I just thought, yeah, that critique was totally fair. So, but I think many people will just stay. I mean, they may not stay with a cap, which is also why I think this is not feasible in the short run. But I think the bigger question is, why have we, on this planet, made it impossible for people to move? Because we have passports, we have border control, we let people drown in the sea, we shoot them, whatever we do. But capital can just go. It's a political choice. So that means, so it is possible to change it, but we should then trace capital. And to do this, so there is actually, for people who are really interested in this topic in depth, there is a German-Canadian philosopher called TThe, who's written a book called Catching Capital, where he proposes how we could have changes in you could say, the architecture of finance, how you could actually trace capital and make sure that there is not this competition between countries. So there is a solution that's technically and economically feasible, but we haven't done it. But the question is really, to what extent do we accept arguments that are really myths or threats as facts? So we should really also, always with all these arguments, I think we should also try to separate bluff from what is true. And in this case, I think there is some truth to it, but it's also to a big part it's bluff.
Thank you, Ingrid. Are there more questions? We would make a second round. Last row.
Yeah, sorry, it will be not very short.
I knew it.
Sorry. I constate that we live in a society where actually everybody focuses on the differences. But my opinion, the only way that we can go on in a positive way, we have to focus on the things where we agree on. 2-3 examples. Nobody actually wants to have refugees. So we should actually, of course, look at the reasons why people have to flee. So everybody agrees on this fact. Or nobody is actually saying we need to produce the things in a way that they break immediately down. It's stupid, everybody knows it. Or, I don't know, half of the food we produce, we don't eat it. Everybody says that's stupid. So why don't we focus on the things where we agree on? Or let me put it another way, what can we do to focus more on the things where actually everybody agrees on?
Thank you for the question. We collect another one. Also, I want to state the figures I gave you on the start of the talk. 7 out of 10 people in Austria do believe we should tax the rich. So there's a thing we agree on. Okay, is there another question? No? Ihr seid schüchtern. Okay. Eine Frage noch hier vorne, und dann kommen wir zur Schlussrunde. Hier vorne ist noch eine Frage. Und dann gehen wir in die Schlussrunde.
Thank you so much to all three of you. Ingrid, I wanted to ask you, because I've noticed people are always motivated to do something when they are personally somehow involved in organizing themselves or something's happened to them, you know, in their life, to actually move forward and come together and do something. Was there a moment in your life where you said, damn, we got to do something? I mean, there is a reason why you've written this book. There's a reason why you've gotten into ethics and philosophy and economy and all of that. Was there a moment in your life where you said, my gosh, this cannot go on like this, we have to change something?
Thank you for the question. Ingrid, you start, maybe?
Yeah, but perhaps can I start with the back question? So I just think, yeah, we should of course focus on the things where we all agree they should be solved, but this is not going to solve any of the problems that I mentioned in the book. We will still have undermining of democracy, we will still have political capture, we will still have the rich emit on average 101 tons CO2 emissions per person per year. Most people here in the room, I mean average people, emit say 8, 9 tons. People in Africa, who are the people who will really get most of the damage from climate change, emit 1 ton or less. These are real problems. We're not going to solve this by only focusing on so-called win-win situations or things where we all agree. I mean, I think the focusing on things where we can peacefully, without political fights, make progress is based off, I'm sorry to say, but of the neoliberal rhetorics. Let's focus, I mean, the techno-optimists and all the people who are, say, economists, they always say, let's focus on win-wins. Yes, of course, but there's all the things that are not win-wins. And then the question is also really, if you talk about win-wins, who wins how much? Because the data that I show in my book, that I have in my book, show that the globalization that did indeed lead to a decrease in the number of people living in absolute poverty, that globalization actually, the vast majority of the wealth created went to the global north and to the rich people in the global north. We gave people in the south breadcrumbs. So if you do not want to have more people fleeing for poverty, give them the money that they should get in the first place. So these things are, I think, interconnected. To your question, I fear I have a really boring answer. There is not a big event in my life, no. The thing is that when I was 18 and I wanted to decide what to study, I knew I wanted to study something to help improve the world. And at the time, people convinced me that this was economics. That was a mistake. I do not regret having studied economics because it has given me a lot of skills that I can use, like reading statistics. But my view is that the kind of dominant economics that we get taught these days is deeply ideological. And I felt that all the time true, but because I was a very good student, people said, no, you can't stop. So my parents made a deal with me that if they were economists, which actually may explain something too, that if I ended my studies, I could then go and study something else. And I've always been interested in questions of inequality. And one day I just had this question like, why, if we have a poverty line, why don't we have like something at the opposite? And when I shared this with my colleagues, as we always do in academia, we share thoughts that we have. They just started to make jokes. They just thought this was not a serious question. And then I thought, well, if you don't have a good argument, then that means there's something at this. And that's how I started to work on this. Yeah.
Thank you, Ingrid. So I have one last question for the podium before we are all invited to have... Is there another one? Okay, let's take this one and then we stop the round.
Okay, also ich würde es gerne auf Deutsch machen, wenn es möglich ist.
Sowieso.
Okay, also ich hätte eine Frage bezüglich, ich weiß nicht, ob es ein bisschen off-topic ist, aber bezüglich Unternehmen. Und es gibt ja mittlerweile schon verschiedene Möglichkeiten, wie man auch in Unternehmen das Vermögen ein bisschen besser verteilen könnte und dass es nicht immer nur bei einer Person oder bei einem kleinen Gremium konzentriert ist. Und meine Frage wäre, dass von einer sehr neoliberalen Schiene immer diese Argumentation kommt von, ja, aber das Risiko sollte quasi, also es gibt ein gewisses Risiko und dieses Risiko möchte erstens niemand von den anderen tragen und außerdem, ja, sollte quasi auch Risiko belohnt werden. Und meine Frage wäre dann, inwiefern sollte Risiko belohnt werden oder sollte Risiko überhaupt belohnt werden? Und was ist Ihre Meinung dazu? Danke.
Ingrid, you like to answer?
So, yeah, so I do think, so when I say about this balancing of the different elements in the threshold, I do think we need to have some room for people who take risks, because I do not believe we are all saints. If we were all, I actually make a joke about this in the book, I say if we were all paid exactly the same wage, I think all of us would become artists or something that is in really pleasure. I mean, I imagine that being an artist, assuming you of course have a fixed wage. So I do think we do need some inequality there, and also to reward entrepreneurs. But there is this almost mythology that it should be, that the possible reward should be endless. And there's very interesting work by the Italian-British economist Mariana Mazzucato, who argues that before neoliberalism, we had a state, which he calls the entrepreneurial state, who took some of those risks. And of course, the state, because it can never go broke by definition, it could take risks that individual entrepreneurs did not have to take. So I think, and that's also what I try to argue for at the end of the book, that if you have a different balance between what you ask or what you ask the government to do, the state, and what you ask companies to do, you have, I think you have more robustness in the system, but it does require a different way of looking at the government. And one of the things that neoliberalism, of course, also has done is to just say the government is always bad, it's always inefficient. And yes, of course, if you keep saying that for 20 years, nobody who is like well-meaning, motivated, etc., still wants to be a politician. So I think that is, or a civil servant. So it's like a reinforcing thing, yeah.
Thank you, Ingrid. So I have one last question here for the podium. I start with Marlene. Marlene, you just told us you gave back all your inheritance. You're going to work like all the rest of us. My question to you is, how are you going to keep up the good fight? Are you going to be a public voice? Are you going to fight for systemic change? Are you going to be an ally, as you were the last couple of years? What is your plan?
Okay, I'm already blushing because you called me an ally. I really give this a lot of thought currently because I don't have a perfect answer, and I'm wary about speculating. I guess I want to make sure that I acknowledge I have a lot of media power currently. I get extreme amounts of attention, and I will not just not have this, I guess, once the redistribution is in full process. Like this starts now. I don't know, the council decided and it will be done. So I guess if I can manage to use especially this media power to maybe share that with people who are already frontline fighters, activists, who do the actual work today for the justices that we get tomorrow, that maybe to share this power also would be something that I could turn into a kind of work that might get funding, might get wages, I don't know. So I'm trying to keep considering what role I can play that would be respectful of the cause and also work together with the needs that I will create for myself through not having all of this wealth anymore. So I don't know. It's I don't have a good answer yet, but I'm trying to make all of you proud.
Oh, Ingrid, I think a US judge 80 years ago said we must make a choice. We can have democracy or we can have concentrated wealth in the hands of a few. We cannot have both. I think this is the main takeaway from your book? Like you highlight all the issues we have with wealth concentration. So considering your audience here, citizens of a liberal democracy, what is the most important thing we should do by tomorrow?
By tomorrow? Make sure you sleep well, which is important for anybody and especially for... Yeah, so I think there are many different things we can do. What I personally find flabbergasted, we still haven't talked about it, is that in Austria there's no inheritance tax. Really, people go and argue for inheritance tax. Yeah, so then I love inheritance tax. Just step it up, because the
dream of it.
The countries, many other countries in Europe have inheritance tax, and people are not fleeing. And there is really a wave of trillions of euros coming to that generation, and it's basically gonna create a generation of super rich kids that didn't do anything to get that money, and I don't think that's very healthy. There are many different things that people could do. When I said the 4 types of things that people with lots of money can do, of course, we, as people who do not have lots of money, can also do those things. We can also join cooperatives that show the way up into a different system. I actually tell everybody, join a union. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but also... if there is in your country a decent political party, join a political party. Even as a member, but you are at least becoming part of a system. Join organizations such as, which could be frontline organizations or bigger, more established organizations such as Amnesty International. So there's all these easy things you can do. And then I think many of us have different types of skills and networks and expertise, and that creates additional possibilities. But I really sincerely believe that everybody can do something. You just have to find your particular thing that both fits your interest, your expertise, and your networks.
Thank you, Ingrid. Die erste Sache, die ihr alle machen könnt, ist, euch noch besser zu informieren und argumentativ noch besser auszustatten. Das geht besonders gut mit diesen beiden Büchern. Die findet ihr da drüben an der Kasse. Marlene und Ingrid bleiben jetzt auch noch ein bisschen hier sitzen. Wer sein Buch gern signiert haben möchte, das ist eure einmalige Gelegenheit, euch eine Unterschrift zu holen. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ihr heute da wart. Ich danke für die angeregte Diskussion. Danke, Marlene. Danke, Ingrid. Da warten jetzt noch ein paar Brötchen und Bier und Wein, und ich freue mich, wenn wir uns noch informell ein bisschen austauschen und ins Plaudern kommen. Dankeschön.
Danke.